Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Salamiyah. In this video, I want to share about discourse community and use of language, factor and use of language, and also group, ways of doing things in the group, and ways of using language that show I belong to the group. Okay, for the first discourse community that I a member of. 1. Discourse community lectures and the use of language, formal, sometimes less formal. For example, when talking to the lecturers to ask something related to the course I have to use formal language to look polite. But in learning, sometimes there is a time to speak using less formal language when discussing in class, discussing lesson being studied. 2. Students. The use of language, casual or a bit formal. For example, in the class of fellow students, my friends and I speak in a casual way to be more relaxed, and the discussion discussed is related to small things, to discuss the lesson, and a little formal if needed. For example, when making a presentation in front of the class, using a bit formal language. 3. Family. The use of language, very casual or less formal with parents. For example, at home when talking with family, especially parents, we usually speak very casually in a language that is very casual or less formal with parents. When talking casually while watching television, while enjoying hot tea in the morning, and when there is a relaxed time. 4. Hobby. Watching Indian films, the use of language, not restricted by level of education. For example, in one community, there are various ages and levels of educations that like Indian films, especially old Bollywood, and the discussion discussed to the film uses casual language that is easily understood by the age group who are still in elementary school or high school age. And so the way I use language in each group is different. Next is factor and the use of language. 1. Ethnic. Use of language. Yes, ethnic influences the use of language, where our ethnic origins, for example, are and our environment is mostly Dayak people, we consciously or not will speak like a Dayak people, little or a lot, will definitely be affected by ethnicity. 2. Education. The use of language, big yes. As we know, education is very influential in the use of language, where through education we know the language and level of education, we determine the use of language. For example, elementary school children may not understand the language of people who are already in high school, so the use of language must be adjusted to the level of education. 3. Age. The use of language, yes. The more we get older, the more we know the use of language, where we receive more and more languages, and we use according to our needs in language. For example, talking to older people, we must use language that is polite and friendly. 4. Gender. Not really the use of language, not really influence use of language, but to other, yes. Gender is not very influential because it is the same between women or men in using language, but for some people, gender affects the use of language, where the language used by men tends to be more violent than women. 5. Occupation. The use of language, yes. Occupation influences the use of language because the environment in which we live will more or less affect the use of language we use. For example, we live in Kalimantan, then our language style will follow the language in Kalimantan itself. Next, about group and then ways of doing things in the group and ways of using language that shows I belong to the group. 1. Group of Indian film lovers. Ways of doing things in the group: talk casually, to be comfortable, talking with friends, and intersperse with jokes. And for the ways of using language that shows I belong to the group: talking casual, so that we can be more involved in the discussions of Indian films, especially old Bollywood films related to the songs and the scenes that we like. 2. Group writing group. And then ways of doing things in the group. Talk in casual, sometimes formal, way to discuss how the characterizations we want to make the story. And for the ways of using language that shows I belong to the group, sometimes formal, talks to discuss characterizations and plots that we are wanted to make the story we want. We do it by sharing jokes to prepare each character that we want, and I try to make the character in accordance with what we want. 3. Group game lover. Ways of doing things in the group. Talk in a casual and more joking way to play the games can be relaxed. And ways of using language that shows I belong to the group. Joking with joking. Joking is very necessary to play relaxed when and the atmosphere is not tense, to make it more fun when playing games, and I have to understand how to play the game so I can play well. Okay, that's all that I can share. Thanks for watching my video. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.